Now, last impulse of the day, still with insight and engagement, what happens when publishers truly listen to their users? So we are prolonging your approach from a different angle. It's now Jack Riley, he's the Director of Commercial and Audience Development at the Huffington Post, and he will be talking to you about how together Opinary and the Huffington Post UK established a new way for users to engage with the Huffington Post's content by boosting meaningful engagement and building deeper relationships between the users and the newsroom. And along with comes Pia Frey. She's the co-founder and head of publisher at Opinary in Germany. So,
hello.
Great to have you here. Two young people at the end of the day. Lovely.
That's a big compliment.
Thank you.
Where's the thing for the... Oh. Yeah. I have a question as a start. How many of you wrote an online comment in the past 2 months? That are many. So you're unusual, because usually people don't write online comments. I used to work as a journalist, and in the newsrooms I've been working in, the comment sections, the places where users are supposed to share their opinion and to interact, were called the wastelands for the trolls and the grumpy old men. So nobody goes there and nobody writes. Many people don't write comments. You're unusual. One of the reasons for this is that comment sections are at the basement of any article, and you're not asked to write an opinion. And at Opinary, we wanted to bring users and newsrooms closer together, and we wanted to make this basement of the article the living room. And by making it fun and easy and insightful for users to share their opinion. So some of you might have seen this before, also here at the conference. And our idea is, or how it works, is that our tools are embedded in articles and ask users specific questions on what they're thinking on this debate. And along of this range on what if Trump will ban Muslims from entering the US, on this range between yes and no, we show what specific media or opinion leaders or experts are thinking, and we enable users to share their own opinion at just one tap. And this started as a journalistic experiment, as a side project. It now grew into a company of 24 people. We are around since 3 years, and we work with all, or almost all, major publishers in Germany and across the world in UK and US, at currently 32 million monthly users who share their opinion this way, who never wrote a comment before. And sitting here is Jack from the Huffington Post, Director of Commercial and Audience Development. Sometimes people think we're siblings, but we're not. And Jack, do users' opinion actually matter to you?
Yeah. So I guess we've been using the Opinary product for the last 6 or 7 months to add polls to our articles in what's like a kind of I guess a deceptively very simple mechanism for people voting. And we'll kind of go on to talk about some examples and how that's kind of affecting us in the newsroom. But I think the first principle is just how important the user is, and I feel like the conference this has been a big theme today, certainly in the talks that I've been to. So I won't kind of I won't reiterate it too many times, but essentially, putting the user at the centre of your content creation and your journalism has been basically the little trick, I guess, that publishers like HuffPost and other digital native publishers have been able to do to grow so quickly. They've kind of stepped into the gap that existed for a long time between traditional media and their audience, and they've kind of disintermediated a lot of traditional media by speaking directly to people and understanding what it is that people are actually interested in. The problem that we had, even places that I guess are considered to be pretty good at it, is that we had only really like 2 sources of that data that we'd be able to use. On the one hand, we'd have like very qualitative but quite low volume data like comments, and comments often very high friction and therefore very polarized, and would help kind of inform your piece. But I think we'd all kind of acknowledge, working in newsrooms, you wouldn't listen too hard to the comments, or you wouldn't base your whole editorial judgment on the comments. On the other hand, we had acres and acres of analytics data, that we're all sat on, but which is captured in a way that tells you almost nothing about people's actual relationship with the content. So you have to infer so much about what people actually think about the stories that they're reading, what their opinions are, not just about your treatment of the story, but how they feel about the whole editorial concept that you're discussing. So, this is why I think this has been really important and useful for us. There's two other reasons I think why this is particularly something that we focused on in the last 6-7 months. One is generally the kind of the rise of populism, the kind of shock election results. There's been this big sense, very tangible in the UK certainly, that journalists have suddenly become very self-conscious and aware of the fact that perhaps they're not as in touch with their audience as they think they are. And we've had this kind of crisis of confidence when you speak to a lot of newsrooms, that they just, subjects like Brexit, we just did not think that was going to happen. And so any way that you can reflect in a more nuanced way your user's opinion is going to help break down those kinds of barriers that might have existed. The other one is just polling. So, traditionally in these kinds of questions, when you think about how your newsroom understands its audience, you do that through polling results. And there have been some calamitously inaccurate polling results around some of the biggest news events in the UK in the last few years that mean that you don't kind of want to trust the polls as well. So if you've got the chance as a publisher to speak directly to your audience in the way that tools like Opinary kind of allow you to do, that's become very powerful and I'd say very vital at this specific time as well.
Brexit was actually a very strong and powerful example to us as well, because I think in Germany the default opinion was that Britain should stay in the EU, and it was the predominant opinion in every newsroom that I've been talking to and that I've been reading about. But actually asking over 600,000 users before the referendum showed us that the majority said, yes, Britain should leave the EU. And this was something that didn't appear to me in my Twitter or Facebook timelines, and wasn't expected to anybody whom I was speaking to. So it showed us that it is a very important time to start listening to our users. But apart from those specific debates, what has been the effect of listening to your users at Huffington Post?
Yeah, first thing I want to point out, this is Huffington Post Germany as well.
Yes, it's Huffington Post
UK Germany was.
They are very, very different from each other.
Yeah, UK Huffington Post was quite was pro EU, but anyway. So I guess the effects of listening, you can kind of split into two. The qualitative effects on the newsroom, how it affects the way that I guess you create and distribute stories, and then secondly quantitatively, and I'll give you some kind of facts on that. In terms of the newsroom, it's worked to kind of close, I guess, an editorial loop that we've got around the content that we're publishing, and reassure us and also challenge us a little bit in some instances about when we're trying to think about whether our editorial agenda is in tune with our audience. We try, like a lot of publishers, to be quite specific about understanding our audience, writing for them in a very specific way. But often we don't really know exactly what they're thinking or their attitudes are to these things. So this tool, just as in a kind of day-to-day sense, has been really useful. Quantitatively, we see a really positive effect from just having these interaction mechanisms in articles. So the two kind of ways that we measured this when we originally did a trial to see if adding the Opinary polls was going to have a good effect on the kind of product experience of HuffPost. The two metrics that we looked for were the engage time and the number of interactions that we actually got. So on the engage time, we see that people are engaged for about 22% longer in terms of the seconds that they spend on the page. And that basically is the time that it takes, I guess, for you to see the poll, to vote on it, to consider your response in the context of all of them, all of the votes that you've got on the poll. In terms of the number of engagements, that's been the really kind of, I guess, the eye-opening one. So we see around a 15% engagement rate on the site, which is huge when you think that Our commenting engagement rate, we worked this out, is 0.2%, so it's tiny. It's a lot smaller than even the Euro average. So that's a huge amount of extra engagement. We see basically on articles that have got this polling mechanism as well as comments, we see over 130 times as many votes as there are comments. So, this is a huge spectrum of opinion that we've cast a light on, and we're now able to see that previously those people would probably not have commented, and so we would never have had them represented in our process at all. The only other kind of subtlety I'd say to it is that this hasn't been like a lift across the board. So we've seen in some areas the polls have been more successful than others. So in news and politics and these kinds of questions, we've seen a really, really positive effect, higher than that average. Where we've placed polls on entertainment articles, for example, we actually don't see much of an we don't see any engaged time uplift. And I guess our theory would be this: asking people about really important topics is quite a different proposition to asking people about topics that they maybe have less of an opinion. Maybe they feel are less vital. But I know that's just one publisher. It's not quite in tune with everything that you've seen elsewhere.
We see that every audience at every publisher is very different from each other. And but the metrics that Jack just mentioned, engaged time on site, social shares and engagement on site, are metrics that not only matter for publishers. And we realized how powerfully this level of engagement and insights changes the game when brands also started to reach out to us. Because brands need interaction too. And brands and companies invest billions in their content marketing with the problem that it does not scale. So outside of single viral hits, it's a big challenge for brands to build a big, reliable audience for the great brand content that is out there. So Opinary not only works with publishers, but also became the one-stop shop where brands get to interact with their audiences within the content of top publishers. So global leading brands like MasterCard or Toyota or Deutsche Bank use us to understand their audiences and the content they really care about, and to create micro-content used by that truly engages users, as used by global leading publishers, and to distribute this content right into the fitting editorial articles across our network to reach the users that really care. This made us not only an insights tool, an engagement tool for publishers, but also a revenue stream, because we let our publishing partners, we share this revenues from brand partners with our publishing partners. But apart from that, Jack, you have some deep insight into where the Huffington Post audience has strong opinions about or surprising trends. And would you share some of these examples?
Yeah, so I guess there's three stories where I'd say that this has particularly been really interesting to us and has maybe challenged us as a newsroom. Having access to this new data has kind of maybe challenged us as a newsroom, or supported us in some ways. So the first one is like the big story like fake news, which everyone is talking about at the moment. And we've all got, as publishers, very, very worked up about this idea. First, the concept of it, and then the appropriation of that term by Donald Trump, and the kind of effect of that. But in this kind of crisis of confidence that I described before, that I think we're certainly seeing in the UK media, there's this sense of just wondering if that's a real story that people actually care about day to day, or is it just something that's kind of been echoing around the kind of media bubble. And what we found when we polled on all of our stories about fake news, and we did some investigative work into this as well, we saw about 70% of people kind of said that they felt fake news was a genuine threat to democracy in the polls that we had on our thing. So that's a great validation for us as a newsroom. It means, okay, it's good to invest time in this story. It isn't that we're going off talking about something that people don't really care about, and that means that we can dedicate more to it. The other example, which I think we might have on a slide, was about Jeremy Corbyn, who's the Donald Trump was one. So before the Donald Trump one, Jeremy Corbyn is the leader of the centre-left opposition party in the UK, the Labour Party, and he's considered to be a pretty left-wing candidate. And his supporters, perceive him to have a really the mainstream media to cover him in a really biased way. what we found from polling on him was that the HuffPost readers gave him an approval rating of more than double the national approval rating. So in terms of how we treat him and how we think about how our audience's attitude to him, that really informs all of our coverage to say, okay, actually, either these, well, to say basically, we need to acknowledge that the audience are supporting him in a way that perhaps nationally we're not seeing borne out in the polls. And that was the difference between a 24% national approval rating for him in December and a 54% approval rating on HuffPost UK when we asked people, could he win a general election? So that was that was an interesting one. This is the biggest one that we've done, and it's kind of unsurprisingly a topic that everybody has an opinion on, and also a pretty strong opinion on. Again, this is from a media perspective, from a publisher perspective, you see the kind of upset that Donald Trump produced electorally in the US, and you hope that your journalistic sensibilities and the liberal democratic values that you kind of think as being central to the country, you hope that they're in touch with your readership, but you can't be kind of always 100%. So seeing that from a poll where more than 84,000 people voted on this one poll on the website, which is huge engagement for us, seeing that come out so unanimously negative, that really validates our coverage, and it means that, okay, we can keep kind of taking the same angles that we're taking on really investigating his presidency and what it means. So yeah, those are the kind of big ones, I'd say.
At Huffington Post, what do you think this change of how you listen to your users and how you engage your users, where is it going to?
So what I'm really excited to think about now, and particularly like pulling this talk together, we've kind of pulled all the data together on the effect on engagement and the votes numbers that we've had and everything else, and it's clear that like it's really kind of resonating with users. So that's really interesting for us. I think the next opportunity is, we've all built into our newsrooms real-time analytics infrastructure, data infrastructure, reporting roles, audience development teams, all this kind of all this infrastructure around using data to help our newsrooms make the best possible decisions day to day. But we just never built it around this type of data because it didn't exist. Like we just didn't have a large-scale polling mechanism that would let us collect opinions in this way. So I guess my hope for the next 6 months is that, having experimented with this and seen it to be a success, we can build it into our editorial workflow in a much more meaningful way, so that just in the same way a journalist will be able to tell you how many shares his piece has had or how many concurrents he has reading it from Chartbeat, he'll be able to say, and you know what, 60% of people actually kind of agreed with what we might have said in that piece, or 70% of people thought that this was an important topic, so let's write more about it tomorrow, let's kind of keep covering it. That's the opportunity that I see to make it, to build real-time opinion data into our existing analytics workflow and just raise everything the newsroom does by using that data.
Apart from making this possible, on a higher level, our mission at Opinary is that after this last year, with those major political surprises where the general public had a different take than many people expected, is to get a better understanding of what people are thinking. So Brexit happened, Trump happened. We see a strong, dominant voice against Merkel currently. And in order to understand users, to build trust among users and newsrooms across the world, we really think it's time to start listening and to start a conversation between newsrooms and users. And I think the best way to start a conversation is always to start to ask a question. So we want publishers to ask users many questions. Any questions?
Any questions? It's the end of the day. It was a long day. May I drop one if there's none?
Go.
Listening to what you say, you ask a question to get an opinion. Sometimes things are so complex that I don't have an opinion because they are too complex for me to give an opinion straight away. Sometimes they are very easy, sometimes not. Do you also ask listeners, readers, users to say, like, what else do you need what do you need as information to make your mind up? So what further can we provide you with articles? What do you need? Do you need something financially, politically about Angela Merkel? What do you need? So tell us what you need to get an opinion, which brings users back to the core value, to journalism.
That's a really good point.
Now, I just ask myself, because if you offer me 5 articles to get the opinion on what I need more input, of course I would go back to Huffington Post immediately, to the back door.
There were approaches that went exactly into this direction. Jennifer Brendel from Herkin, she's very much going into this direction by asking users what you want to read about. We've seen this. At the core of our mission is to get the an immediate idea about how are people thinking about key debates. And these key debates don't have to be political, but can be about Kim Kardashian and the new iPhone or white sneakers.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess we phrase it perhaps as trying to ask people if they think something is important or that kind of way. But no, I don't think like we're routinely asking people if they want to hear more of something, and when we should be. You know, I think that's a great idea.
Any further question from you? No, I think everybody wishes you great success in the future. Do you have anything on your agenda for next year? What else you're going to implement, or to how to develop anything further, or something like that in your collaboration? Yeah,
so I think one quite simple thing is from a workflow perspective at the moment, we're including polls in quite an ad hoc way. So we're kind of creating them or co-creating them with Pia's team. But we want to start to programmatically include them into pages automatically, so to dramatically raise the number of votes we got. So we've had 1 million votes in the last sort of 6 months. We want to get to 10 million votes in the next 6 months.
Okay.
And Pia, you've developed the technology basically to do that.
Okay. And you've got the servers for that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.